I was convinced my sister was lying about being a lawyer, so I reported her to the disciplinary committee and got our parents to back me. But during the hearing, the judge recognized her name, praised her past case, and publicly exposed how wrong I was. I'm the oldest sibling. My sister Alyssa is younger than me by a few years. We grew up in a family that cared way too much about how things looked from the outside. My dad was obsessed with talking about potential and where his kids were going to end up. My mom cared about what people at church or family friends thought. Every conversation somehow circled back to achievements, careers, and whether we sounded impressive enough when people asked what we were doing. Alyssa was always the opposite of me. She was private to the point of being secretive. She never volunteered information. She didn't talk about her plans. She didn't ask for help. She just kind of disappeared into her own world. Even growing up, teachers described her as intense and cold. Not mean, just distant. She didn't bond easily with people, including family. After university, she moved away. Different city, different life. She stopped coming home often. When she did, she kept things vague. At some point, my parents started telling people she was in law. Eventually that turned into, she's a lawyer. Alyssa never corrected them, but she also never confirmed anything clearly. She didn't talk about clients, cases, co-workers, or even what firm she worked for. It was always surface level and easy to dodge. For a long time, I let it go. I assumed she was just being weird, which is normal for her. But the longer it went on, the stranger it felt. Years passed, and nothing concrete ever came up. No firm name, no professional milestones, no stories, just vague answers and subject changes. The moment that really stuck with me happened at a cousin's engagement dinner. Someone asked Alyssa what kind of law she practiced. Not in a confrontational way, just casual. She gave a very generic answer about doing appeals and research-heavy work. No specifics, no enthusiasm. Then she immediately redirected the conversation. Later that same night, one of our aunts made a joke comparing lawyers to TV characters. Alyssa didn't react at all. No laugh, no comment. It was small, but it stayed in my head. After that, I started paying attention. I started noticing how often she avoided direct questions, how she let other people label her career without confirming it herself, how her online presence was almost intentionally empty. Her LinkedIn barely said anything. Her job title was vague. No firm logo, no colleagues interacting with her posts. It didn't look like anyone else's profile in that field. I admit this is where I crossed into obsession. Over the next few months, I started looking things up on my own. I searched bar association records using her maiden name. Nothing came up. I double-checked graduation dates. I compared timelines. I convinced myself that something was off. In my head, the only explanation that made sense was that she wasn't actually a lawyer, but some kind of legal assistant or researcher who let everyone assume more than was true. What made it worse was my parents. They had already been bragging about her for years. I didn't think they could handle being wrong. I genuinely believed they were in denial because admitting the truth would mean admitting they misrepresented her to everyone they knew. Eventually, I decided they needed to know. I sat them down and framed it as concern. I told them that if Alyssa was lying about credentials, it wasn't just embarrassing, it could be illegal. I said she could get arrested or sued. I said they could be dragged into it if they kept repeating the lie. That's when everything spiraled. My mom panicked. She cried about how she'd told church friends that Alyssa was a lawyer. My dad got angry and defensive, but also clearly scared. Neither of them wanted to confront Alyssa directly. They wanted the issue handled quietly and officially. That's when the idea of reporting it came up. I didn't force them, but I won't pretend I didn't lead the charge. I drafted the complaint. I laid everything out the way I saw it. I claimed identity misrepresentation. I claimed she benefited socially and professionally from the lie. My parents signed statements backing it, mostly because they trusted my interpretation of the situation. I submitted the report to the disciplinary committee thinking it would be a simple verification process. Either she was licensed or she wasn't. If she was, fine, we'd look stupid and move on. If she wasn't, then the truth would finally be out and everyone would stop pretending. I thought it would be reviewed quietly, maybe bounced back asking for clarification, maybe dismissed outright if I was wrong. What I didn't factor in was that whatever process exists on their end doesn't happen in a vacuum. Alyssa didn't hear about it from me or from our parents. She found out because her workplace did. A few days after I submitted everything, my mom called me in a panic saying Alyssa's firm had contacted her asking what was going on. Apparently, the complaint triggered some kind of internal review on their side. From what I understand, compliance flagged it and her access was temporarily limited while they checked things. I don't know the exact mechanics of it, But it wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet. It was very real, very immediate, and very professional. What stood out to me was that Alyssa still didn't reach out. No call, no text, nothing. Given how serious this was, I honestly expected her to confront me or at least ask what I was thinking. Instead, about a week later, I got a certified letter in the mail, 1 page, very formal. It said she was aware of the complaint, that she had retained counsel, and that I was to preserve any communications or documents related to the situation. That was it. No explanation, no denial, no attempt to clear anything up. To me, that felt telling. I know people will say lawyers act through lawyers, but this wasn't some stranger. This was my sister. If she was innocent, why wouldn't she just explain? Why wouldn't she say I got it wrong or that there was a misunderstanding? The silence felt calculated, like she was trying to control the situation rather than resolve it. Around the same time, things started going sideways with the rest of the family. The cousin whose engagement dinner started all of this reached out to tell me I went too far. According to her, I had turned an awkward dinner conversation into a full-blown attack. She said it wasn't my place to investigate Alyssa, and that if there was an issue, it should have stayed private. I tried to explain that this wasn't about embarrassment or family drama, it was about honesty and credentials. But she wasn't interested. She cut contact completely after that. Then the family group chat exploded. People picked sides fast. Some said I was doing the right thing by not letting a possible lie keep going. Others accused me of being jealous or obsessed. My parents were trying to calm everyone down while also backtracking in real time. They started saying things like they only signed statements because they trusted me, which felt unfair given how involved they were when this started. I'll admit this is where I doubled down instead of pulling back. I felt like everyone was suddenly protecting Alyssa without actually knowing the facts. I started explaining my reasoning more publicly, laying out timelines, pointing out inconsistencies. I wanted people to understand that I didn't wake up one day and decide to ruin her life. This was something that had bothered me for years. In hindsight, one of the worst decisions I made was talking to a friend of mine who works adjacent to journalism. Not a reporter exactly, but someone who knows how stories travel. I framed it as background, not something to publish. But even saying it out loud to someone outside the family made it bigger. I didn't give names or documents, but I gave enough detail that it could be pieced together by anyone who already knew us. A few days later, I found out Alyssa had formally requested that the disciplinary hearing be public. That information came through the same friend, not through family. Apparently, she didn't want a closed-door review. She wanted everything on record. On top of that, the hearing wasn't going to be handled by some anonymous panel. A retired federal judge was assigned to oversee it. That was the first moment I felt real unease. Up until then, I had pictured this as an administrative process. Forms, emails, maybe a short meeting. A public hearing with a judge felt excessive. It felt like overkill. I couldn't understand why someone who claimed to value privacy would suddenly want this much attention unless the goal was intimidation. That's how I framed it in my head anyway. I told myself this was a power move, that Alyssa was trying to scare me and our parents into backing off. I told myself that if she really had nothing to hide, she wouldn't need to escalate it this far. But the truth is, by this point, everything was already hostile. There was no neutral ground left. Family relationships were strained or broken. Alyssa wasn't speaking to any of us directly. My parents were stressed and defensive, and what started as a concern about honesty had turned into something that felt a lot bigger than I intended. The hearing date is set, and for the first time since this began, I realized there is no way to quietly undo it. What should I do? Update 1, and I've been sitting on this update because I needed time to process what actually happened. I went into the hearing thinking this would finally be the moment where things became clear one way or the other. Instead, it blew up every assumption I had and made the situation public in a way I still don't fully understand. I need to explain the setup first, because I genuinely thought this was going to be low-key. The hearing wasn't in a courtroom exactly, but it was in one of those buildings that feels like one. Security desk, metal detectors, people in suits everywhere. It wasn't casual. What surprised me immediately was how many people were there who had nothing to do with our family. There were observers, a few people with notepads, and at least 2 people who were very clearly press. I later found out Alyssa's name is searchable in legal circles, which I did not know before that day. The retired federal judge overseeing the hearing was introduced early on, and the entire tone of the room shifted immediately. This was not a rubber stamp process. This was serious. Alyssa came in calm. Not emotional, not defensive, not dramatic. She didn't acknowledge me or our parents at all. She was with her attorney, and they looked prepared in a way that made me uncomfortable. I kept telling myself that preparation didn't equal innocence. Anyone can prepare if they know how the system works. The hearing barely got started before things went off script. The judge paused almost immediately after seeing Alyssa's name on the file. I didn't understand why at first. Then it became clear that he recognized it, not vaguely, not as a possibility, but specifically. He referenced a past constitutional appeal and her written work on it. He mentioned a clerkship. These weren't things you could fake your way into. The way he spoke about it made it obvious he had personal familiarity with the case. That was the first crack in my certainty. What followed was information I didn't know and honestly didn't think to check for. Alyssa does not practice under the same last name she grew up with. She uses a different surname professionally. It wasn't a nickname or a minor change. It was deliberate, documented, and apparently approved for safety and privacy reasons. That explained why my searches came up empty. I had been looking for someone who technically didn't exist on paper the way I expected her to. It got worse from there. The committee went through the substance of the complaint, slowly, methodically. They didn't accuse Alyssa of anything outright. Instead, they asked questions about what she had actually claimed over the years. What she listed publicly, what she said to clients, what she said to family. Piece by piece, it became clear that a lot of the assumptions came from us, not her. She never claimed to be a trial lawyer. She never named firms publicly. She never marketed herself socially. Other people, including our parents, filled in the gaps because it sounded better. Then it was my turn to answer questions. I thought I was prepared. I had timelines, screenshots, notes. But the questions weren't about volume. They were about intent, about wording, about whether I understood the difference between inference and fact. When I explained how I reached certain conclusions, I could hear how speculative it sounded out loud. Things that felt obvious in my head sounded weak when laid out formally. The judge didn't raise his voice or insult me. That almost made it worse. He described the complaint as punitive rather than protective. He said it read as vindictive. He questioned why family disputes were being escalated into professional accusations without direct verification. He pointed out that the Bar Association isn't meant to resolve personal grievances. At some point, I realized the hearing was no longer about Alyssa at all. It ended earlier than scheduled. There was no dramatic ruling in the moment, just a clear shift in direction. Alyssa's credentials were not in question. Mine, in a sense, were. When the hearing adjourned, people approached Alyssa and her attorney. No one approached me. On the way out, someone asked for comment, and that was when it really hit me that this was no longer private. Our parents were silent the entire walk back to the car. No one said, "I told you so," but no one defended me either. Everything I thought would be exposed had turned around and focused on me instead. I went into that room expecting answers. I walked out realizing that I might have misunderstood the situation from the start and that the consequences were bigger than I ever planned for. Update 2. I didn't post right away after the hearing because things started happening very fast and not in ways I expected or felt prepared for. I genuinely thought the hearing was the end of it. Embarrassing, yes, but over. I was wrong. Within a week, I was formally served. Alyssa filed a civil claim against me for defamation and abuse of process. I want to be very clear here because people keep assuming things in the comments. This wasn't framed as a sibling dispute. It wasn't emotional. It was procedural and detailed. The filing listed timelines, screenshots, copies of my complaint, and even included references to the hearing transcript. The language was dry and professional, which somehow made it worse. It wasn't about how she felt. It was about what I did. At the same time, my employer contacted me. I work in a compliance-adjacent role, not law, but still a field where judgment and discretion matter. HR said they'd been contacted by a third party asking whether my conduct reflected company values. They stressed they weren't accusing me of anything, but they needed an explanation on record. I tried to frame it the same way I always had, that I believed I was reporting something legitimate, that I acted in good faith, that anyone would have done the same with the information I had. I could tell from their faces that this was not landing the way I thought it would. What really caught me off guard was my parents' reaction once the legal part became real. Up until then, they'd been fully aligned with me. They signed the complaint. They encouraged me. They kept saying they were glad someone was finally holding Alyssa accountable. That shifted almost overnight. As soon as lawyers were involved, they started distancing themselves. Suddenly, the language changed. They said they trusted my judgment but didn't expect things to go this far. They said I took initiative they didn't fully understand. They said maybe I misunderstood some things and acted too quickly. It felt like they were quietly trying to step out of the blast radius. Around this time, I learned something new that people keep bringing up in the comments. Through one of the filings, it came out that Alyssa had intentionally limited contact with the family years ago, specifically because of me. Not because of one big blow-up, but because of a pattern. The document listed examples going back to university. Me correcting people when they praised her. Me questioning her credentials in front of relatives. Me framing her choices as strange or suspicious. Me repeatedly suggesting she was hiding something. I honestly didn't recognize it as a pattern at the time. To me, it was just asking questions. Seeing it laid out chronologically was uncomfortable, but I still don't fully agree with the framing. I never sabotaged her directly. I just didn't blindly accept things that didn't make sense to me. Instead of laying low like several people advised, I made another mistake. I posted a long explanation on Facebook. I didn't name Alyssa directly, but anyone who knew us could tell who it was about. I framed it as a warning about accountability and how reporting concerns shouldn't be punished. I talked about free speech, public records, and how families shouldn't enable dishonesty for the sake of appearances. I genuinely believed I was defending myself. I didn't insult her, but I also didn't back down. That post was screenshotted almost immediately. It ended up attached to the lawsuit as an example of ongoing harm. I hadn't considered that. I thought once the report was filed, everything else was just commentary. Apparently not. The social fallout got worse too. People I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me, not to check in, but to tell me to stop. A cousin blocked me outright. Someone forwarded me a link to an article mentioning the hearing in passing, with Alyssa's professional achievements summarized in 2 paragraphs and the complaint described as unfounded. My name wasn't printed, but it didn't need to be. What's strange is that through all of this, Alyssa never contacted me directly. No messages, no demands. Everything came through lawyers. That silence bothered me more than if she'd yelled or accused me. It made it feel final, like I wasn't worth engaging with personally anymore. I'm being honest when I say I still don't fully know how to process this. I understand now that reporting someone isn't a neutral act the way I thought it was. It creates consequences whether the concern is upheld or not. I didn't factor that in because I was so focused on being right. I still think some of my questions were reasonable, but I can also see that the way I pursued them crossed into something else. At this point, I'm dealing with legal costs, workplace scrutiny, and a family dynamic that's quietly shifting away from me. My parents talk less. When they do, it's careful. Alyssa might as well not exist anymore. Final update. This will probably be my last update because everything that could settle has settled, and everything that didn't has just gone quiet in a way that feels permanent. The civil case didn't go to trial. After months of back and forth through lawyers, it ended the way most of these things do, privately. There was a settlement. I can't get into specifics because of an NDA, but it involved financial damages, a written apology, and a formal agreement that I will not file any future complaints about Alyssa or her work without independent legal review. That part surprised me at first, but my lawyer explained it was standard when someone is accused of abusing reporting systems. I didn't like the wording, but arguing it would have dragged things out longer and cost more. The apology was drafted carefully. It wasn't a personal letter. It didn't go to Alyssa directly. It was part of the settlement packet, reviewed by both sides. I signed it because that was the condition for this to end. People keep asking if I meant it. I meant that I wanted the situation to stop. Beyond that, I don't think intent matters much anymore. Around the same time, Alyssa withdrew the rest of her claims. The disciplinary committee closed the file entirely, noting no misconduct on her part and no further action needed. My name is attached to that record as the complainant, which I was told is normal, but it still feels strange knowing it exists somewhere in an archive tied to her career in that way. What I didn't expect was how quietly she exited everything else. She didn't post about it. She didn't try to correct the record publicly. A few months after the settlement, my parents mentioned, almost casually, that she had accepted a position overseas, not a short-term thing, a full relocation, different jurisdiction, different bar, different life. She also asked them not to share her contact details anymore and requested that any updates about her stay private. My parents complied. More than that, they adjusted. They stopped bringing her up around me. They also stopped involving me in their conversations with her. At first, I thought this was temporary, just everyone licking their wounds. Then holidays came and went. I wasn't told when they visited her. I found out after the fact that they'd flown out together. When I asked why they hadn't mentioned it, my mom said she didn't want things to be awkward. That's been the theme since then. Everything is careful now, measured. I'm still invited to things, but not everything. There are gaps in information that I can feel, but not fill. It's clear they've rebuilt a relationship with her that doesn't include me, and they're treating that as a reasonable compromise. Work stabilized eventually. HR closed their review with a warning about future conduct and discretion. I wasn't fired. I wasn't demoted, but I can tell the perception shifted. I'm no longer asked to weigh in on gray areas the way I used to be. People are polite, but distant. That might be in my head, but it feels consistent. I know how this looks from the outside. A lot of you said early on that even if I thought something was off, the way I handled it guaranteed I'd lose no matter what. I didn't want to believe that at the time. I thought being technically correct would count for more. I still think there were inconsistencies in how Alyssa presented herself over the years. I still think she let people assume things she didn't correct. That's the one thing I haven't changed my mind about. But here's what I understand now, even if I don't like it. Being right about a small detail doesn't matter when the cost of proving it is this high. Whatever satisfaction I thought would come from forcing clarity never arrived. Instead, I lost my relationship with my sister entirely. I strained things with my parents in a way that won't fully heal. I damaged my own reputation by insisting that intent should outweigh impact. Alyssa never reached out after the settlement, not once. No closure conversation, no final explanation. Just distance. At this point, I don't think she ever will. She didn't need to confront me to move on. She just removed herself from my life and built something that doesn't include me. I thought exposing her would force the truth out. All it did was expose me.